about love.
Hi, guys. This is Dillis.
Hello, this is Jacob Minang.
Welcome to a second lesson on communication in marriage.
So this week we're going to be diving deep into communication as something that is at the heart of every successful failed marriage.
All right, let's dive in, Jacob. I think
So,
first we want to start by talking about what the Bible has to say about communication. Then we'll talk a little bit about what the Catechism of the Catholic Church has to say about communication. And then from there, we'll go into the aspects of communication that really are foundational and we all need to think about and understand as we continue to improve our communication styles with our spouses.
so starting from the New Testament, if you look at the letter of one of Jesus' apostles, James. So you go to James 1:19. It says, "Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry." So sometimes communication is actually more about how little you say and about how much more you are listening to the other person. And this is expanded more in the book of Psalms. You go to Psalm 19, verse 14. The word of the Lord tells us, "May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer."
So, from those two, if you go to Proverbs 18, verse 13, it says, spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish. So, there you all have it, guys. The Bible itself tells us that, we need to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. And then let the words of your mouth be pleasing to the one you're talking to. And you should, before you spout off, before you speak, please listen to the facts. And if you don't listen to the facts, you're just making yourself look like a fool. All right. So we're going to talk now about what the Catechism says about communication.
So given the 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church, and seeing not every document could be included in the Bible, the Catholic Church has a very rich tradition that has been handed down, documented as well, but just not in the Bible. And one of the books that is central to Catholic doctrine is called the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So we're going to go through a number of passages there that emphasizes this concept of communication. So we go to Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 2477, lines 278 to 279. It tells you respect for reputation of persons forbids every attitude and word likely to cause them unjust injury. A person that uses attitude and word likely to cause unjust injury to another person becomes guilty of a number of things. One of them is guilty of rash judgment. So, before we even dive deep into this, we already know how everybody tells you how your words can lead to our own personal condemnation or can also lead to the death of somebody. Our words sometimes are more powerful than a sword. And speaking a lie against somebody is equivalent to literally killing that person because you've killed them, their character, you've killed their reputation. So by not telling the truth, speaking injurious words of somebody, you're guilty of three things that are related to poor communication. The very first one is that you're guilty of rash judgment. And this is basically when you assume the moral fault of a neighbor without a sufficient foundation.
Yeah. And a lot of us are guilty of that. I'm fond of just making up my mind that Jacob meant to do this to harm or to hurt. And then I start talking off of that.
Another thing we're guilty of is we can be guilty of detraction. And this simply means when we disclose other people's faults and failings without objectively valid reason to persons who do not need to know. So you know what we're talking about here? We're talking about gossip. So somebody has not asked for information from you. They don't need to know that information, but you're boiling to go tell them the information about a neighbor, a friend, a brother, a sister. Because as they say, misery love company. It makes you feel, you think that's going to make you feel a little bit better the more people know about your friend's faults or your neighbor's fault or your sister's fault. That's not going to cure you of your own weaknesses. It's just going to make you guilty of detraction.
Yep. And then the last but not the least, the third one is you become guilty of calumny. Calumny is just a false accusation, falsely accusing someone. So this is when you make remarks contrary to the truth, which harms the reputation of others and gives occasion for false judgment concerning that person. So there you have it. There are three things the Catechism is emphasizing, that when you speak out of tune, you're guilty of rushing to false judgment. You're guilty of, what was the second one, Jacob?
You're guilty of detraction.
Detraction. And then the third one is calumny.
Calumny.
All right.
So speaking without thinking can lead to you having all these three guilts in your conscience. Okay. Okay.
Right.
And what is the cure to this? The cure to this, the Catechism of the Catholic Church actually clearly aligns. The first one is that you have charity and respect for the truth. That should really dictate the response to every request for information or communication. And it takes us back to the Bible because again, the tradition is not standing on its own. When asked about the three most important virtues, we realize that the Bible emphasizes that is faith, hope, and charity. And charity stands tall amongst all these three virtues.
Yep. The next one is the Catechism emphasizes that the good and safety of others, respect for privacy, and the common good are sufficient reasons for being silent about what ought not to be known or for making use of a discreet language. So, out of my concern for the good and safety of the other person, it's okay for me to tell you, you know what, I cannot disclose that. We cannot talk about this, or maybe we should not be talking about this, right? That will curb the sin of detraction that we all fall in.
And again, remember that it's our duty as Christians to avoid scandal. So, and this commands for strict discretion. It's not everything that we know, or every assumption, or every suspicion that we have about somebody that calls for us to pull somebody to the side and start whispering to them because we may be totally wrong. And even if we are right, you might be giving somebody information that they don't need to know and they don't have to know, especially if it's information that's injurious to somebody's reputation. No one is bound to reveal the truth to someone who does not have the right to know it. Just because it's the truth does not mean that you have to share it. What is the impact of you sharing that information?
Yeah. All right. So now, having understood what the Bible has to say and what the Catechism of the Catholic Church has to say about us communicating and communicating well, let's dive into why we have miscommunications. Right, Jacob?
Yeah. So what are the things that usually make us not be to be able to be effective in our communication with our spouses and others in general? And I think it's very straightforward things. The first one is we tend to be distracted when we want to talk. We have divided attention, and you know how we are always insisting on getting our children's undivided attention. It starts at that age, and when we have formed it, it's stuck, and then it becomes a struggle to be able to give someone undivided attention. So distraction is the first thing. The next thing is that we engage in selective listening. We're only hearing what we want to hear. Okay. And then the third thing is that besides being distracted or engaging in selective listening, we in the process of having a conversation with a spouse, we are preoccupied with argument that supports our position. We're trying to form our argument while the spouse is still trying to talk to us. And then we are overwhelmed by voices in our head. We really need to quiet those voices in our heads that come from the last point of being preoccupied with trying to come up with an argument. We keep on thinking about our arguments when we are not talking, or we are making an argument when we are talking. And so it's different words are coming out of our mouths, and our head is thinking something else. And then you end up in a situation where even when somebody repeats what they thought they heard you say that's not what you said, even though they are verbatim, because of that disconnect between what's going on in your head and the voices and your words.
Jacob, we often call this the state of schizophrenia, where you have four people in a conversation, but you
Instead of
only
two.
see two people, two people talking. But
Yeah.
because of the voices in their head, that voices in their head add to them two physically talking to make four people in the conversation.
Exactly. And the cure to this is pretty easy. The cure to this is active listening. If you get into a conversation, there are two people involved. It's one person that wanted to communicate something. That person is going to walk into it. They need to be active, to be assertive. But being assertive means being successful at communicating. It doesn't mean ramping something down somebody's throat. If you're unsuccessful, you're not assertive. But that person has a responsibility to listen actively. And listening actively means avoiding the five things that we've just mentioned.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that soon. One other reason why we have miscommunication is because we talk too fast. I'm sure just like Jacob and I are trying to ram this down through your head so that we can hit that 30 minutes marker that we have for ourselves. We talk too fast. And when you talk too fast, your partner feels like they're not being heard, right? And they feel like you're talking over them. And that makes them to distrust you because when anybody, think about it, when anybody talks too fast around you, I'm sure you walk away thinking that person is trying to hide something.
Yeah, you think
And
they're
that's the same
suspicious. Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and the cure to this is very simple. If you really are trying to communicate something that's very important, you have to be intentional to slow it down. Slow down the conversation. Use time as your friend.
The third one is that we use the wrong voice and the wrong body language. Our voice is the most powerful verbal communication tool that we have. And there are three voices we often say that are available to us when we talk. You can use what we call the sexy voice, or you you can use a positive, playful voice, or you can use the direct instructional voice. So there are three. Don't use the sexy voice unless you're in your bedroom. That's fine. You don't want to use the sexy voice when there's something you seriously want to talk about. However, do not use the direct instructional voice when you're trying to pass something away. Never use this voice. It signals dominance, and your partner feels like you're trying to push them over and you're trying to control them. So for your sake, avoid using this direct instructional voice. What you want to use is your playful voice, your positive playful voice. That calms down everybody. It gives an air of safety to your partner, and that allows them to just continue to talk as you guys are trying to communicate.
And the third thing with miscommunication is that we fail to use mirroring and silence. And what do I mean by this? Mirroring simply means for the active listener, you are repeating the last three or the critical 1 to 3 words of what somebody is saying. So you're trying to confirm to them that I'm actually listening to you. And it's only when you repeat, you get them right, then they're sure that you're listening to them. That's simply what mirror means. The other thing is silence. And you think that silence is obvious. If somebody's talking to me, then I'm supposed to be listening, and listening means I'm going to be quiet, right? With suppressed, some people just cannot help themselves. They feel like they have to start defending themselves immediately. So silence causes your partner to continue talking and elaborating on what they just said.
Mhm.
If anything else, it helps them to feel at the end of the day that they have gotten everything out of their chest. And if you must talk, if you're not going to be silent, mirror. Mirror means just restate what you have heard, the most important part of what you heard, and don't try to be defensive. Don't answer about it, and just ask the person to continue talking if they confirm that you mirrored correctly.
It's funny, Jacob, because even though you and I know this too, there's so many times we get caught in you say something and I immediately jump to say something else that I was thinking, and then you
Yeah.
say something back that you're
And then,
thinking.
then I go
And
like, hold on the list.
yeah, yeah. So and I try to catch myself and say, I hear you say, I hear you say. And once as I say, when I start a sentence with I hear you say, then I can repeat what he has said, and it gives him the chance to be able to actually confirm that that's what he has said before I can respond.
You can know you're not actively listening, that you're not mirroring, you're not being silent when somebody's talking to you and then they go like, let me finish. That right there is supposed to be your cue that you're being interactive and you're not listening.
Yes, yeah. So now that we've talked about the miscommunication, what leads to us having this miscommunication, let's go now into effective communication. So there are two parts to effective communication: being assertive and listening actively. So we'll dive into the being assertive part, which should not be confused with screaming and raising your voice and being stern and all that. Being assertive here is just knowing your facts, knowing what you really want to say, not being emotional about it. And Jacob will take us into the next one, being assertive.
So assertiveness, basically, if I have to define the term, just means your ability to express your feelings and ask for what you want in a relationship. It's a valuable communication skill. And I have to tell you here what assertiveness is not. Assertiveness is not getting something off your chest. It's not saying anything, everything they wanted to say about that. Assertiveness for effective communication requires you being successful at actually communicating to somebody that listened to you and you left feeling like, oh, I was heard. If you got into conversation and left and you didn't feel like you were heard, it doesn't matter if you got it off your chest. You were not being assertive. So in successful couples, both individuals tend to be quite assertive. And so if it's the successful couple, it means that each individual it knows how to be able to take their time to communicate to another person that's willing to listen in a way that makes the other person willing to listen, and not in
Yeah.
a way that turns off the other person and just shut you down. They might be sitting there, but they've shut you off.
Rather than assuming, right, Jacob, rather than assuming that they can read your mind, right, you have to share your feeling and ask clearly and directly what you want, and not assume that your partner can read your mind. So there are three things that make an assertive conversation. An assertive conversation should always start with the sentence I. Always start with
The
using
I
an
word,
I
use the I. You tend to use
statement.
the I pronoun more often when you're being assertive
Yeah.
than using the you pronoun,
Mhm.
because when you use you set the person off to turn on their defenses, build a wall because they think you're attacking them.
Yeah.
So if you can try your very best to start your sentences with I statements, you
Mhm.
go a long way in getting the other person to listen to you, and that's the only way you can be assertive.
For example, hey Jacob, I want to take a trip this winter to the beach, but I know that you like to stay at home and have staycation. I'm truly feeling confused. Can we have a conversation? So you see, in the other sentence, I've been using my eyes. No, I didn't start with him. I am starting with I. So then I can really communicate correctly. And Jacob talked about the next one already, which is avoid statements that begin with you. Avoid statements that begin with you. And then the third one is be positive and respectful in your communication. Use that playful voice like we were just talking about. Say, use your please and use your thank yous, right? Make polite phrases. I can't count how many times I hear someone wanting to request something and nowhere there do they start with please and thank you. Come on, people. Your mother taught you better. Use please, use thank you.
So
So
and so when you're if you're able to, if you are being assertive, when you get into a conversation, as I like to say, that usually most of the time there's usually just one of you that has something they want to talk about, and the other person is listening. Unlike when you guys are just sitting on the couch to watch TV, and then there's no specific topic, there's no specific concern. So both of you can either person can start a conversation, the other person is interjecting, and it's just fun loving. But when it's clear that there's somebody that has something that they need to talk about, that person has to be assertive, which we have gone through the assertive part of it, and at the end of the day, they have to feel like they were successful in communicating. The role of the other person, you know very well who it is in that conversation had something to say, and your role then coming in, because you're not the one that had something that you wanted to bring up, is to listen actively. And what does this mean? It means your ability to let your partner know you understand them by restating their message. Good communication depends on you carefully listening to another person.
the active listening process lets the sender know whether or not the message they send was clearly understood by having the listener restate what they have heard. So, like we're talking about the mirroring thing before. Through active listeners, you make your partner feel safe enough so that the voices in their heads can really quiet down, and it allows them to keep talking and talking and talking so that they can eventually go from telling you what they want to you identifying out of them talking about what they want, what they truly need.
So it's interesting. We're reading a book about hostage negotiation, one that was written by a hostage negotiator, and it's surprising how if you're a good active listener, how much you can actually get in a negotiation situation, an emergency negotiation situation, where you think that you're getting in there to negotiate, you're going to be talking to the hostage taker. No, make sure that that person is the one that's doing most of the talking, and you're just actively listening. And this phrase stuck to my mind when I read that book. It went like, if you let them talk and talk and talk, what is going on is that you're having talking going on, therefore there's no shooting going on. So you're sure that no hostage is dying at that time while the hostage taker is talking to you. So let them do all the talking. The goal
Yeah.
is to identify what your partner actually needs when you're talking. And it might be monetary, it might be emotional, it might be otherwise. But but just listen and only draw it out and only rephrase, just mirror, but don't say anything, don't defend yourself.
Again, remember, when your partner is talking, they're talking about their wants. But the goal is for you to listen for their needs. This is why when they're talking about their wants, it's very easy for them to talk about their wants. The wants represent our aspiration for getting our way, right? And they give us the illusion that we're under control. When we're talking about what we want, we're under control. On the other hand, the needs implies survivor. What we need, this is the very minimum that requires us to act. Therefore, it makes us vulnerable. This is why it's difficult for your partner to talk to you about their needs. However, if they're talking about their wants, you can listen into it and hear the need.
The need is always hidden underneath what they are saying. But if you they don't think that they're being listened to, they'll never express that need. So if you just listen well enough, they might eventually get to it, or you're able to infer from their wants. So there are three things that you typically will tell that are good qualities of active listeners. Active listeners tend to listen attentively without interruption. The active listener will usually be able to very good at mirroring. They'll be able to restate what they heard, to the extent that sometimes you that was talking, you the one that were wrong in the sense that when they restate what they heard is what they heard your mouth express, but because there was a disconnect between your mouth and what you were thinking, usually you find yourself going like, oh, that is not what I said. Then when they restate, you realize that, oh my God, they were listening, and
Uh,
that would help you to communicate better, to calm down, because finally for once they're actually listening to you. And then
I'm
lastly, go ahead, Leslie.
I was just going to say, I'm just sitting over here smiling because I cannot count how many times I've told you, that's not what I said, Jacob. And then I go on to say something else, and you're like, okay, and then you can restate it. But all of us get caught in that. That's not what I said. And you can, when you catch your spouse in that you're doing a good thing, right? It means you've just mirrored, you've just said what you heard them say. And when they say, that's not what I said, the next thing you want to say is, okay, repeat what you said. The one thing we get stuck in as a people is you get stuck in trying to prove prove to your spouse that that's what they said. No, don't do that. Please avoid doing that. Just tell your spouse, okay, repeat what you said so that I can say it. Because trust me, truly, what I was thinking is not what came through my mouth. So I did not even hear it myself because I was still thinking about what I wanted to say. So you insisting that that's what I said wouldn't help, right? Okay. So the next one.
So again, the last piece of being an active listener is you should be able to acknowledge the content and the feelings of your speaker. Okay, and this is very crucial. When somebody, if your spouse tells that this thing that you did made me feel this way, or this is how I felt, doesn't matter if that wasn't your intent. It's very important for you to acknowledge the way your spouse feels or the way they say that your act or your action or your words made them feel. That's actually the first hurdle that you ever overcome. If you just simply acknowledge that instead of trying to explain away the fact that you never intended to hurt anyone, that wasn't your intention. No, all of that explanation and justification is not going to help. It's not going to take you anywhere. So that last piece of active listening, make it start affirming somebody's true feelings. It's very crucial.
Like we said, Jacob, is all about the other person's perception. So if that person perceived that that's what you did, is they're not saying that that's what you did. That was their perception.
Yeah.
So even if it's not what you did, acknowledge it. That's their perception of what happened. Acknowledge it, apologize, and you guys move on and learn to do it better.
So quick recap therefore, as an active listener, you should give full attention to the person that's talking. Listen without being distracted. Don't play your phone, don't get on the TV, don't look at it, don't look away. Number two, try to mirror. Restating helps them know that you're listening to them. And lastly, if you're going to say anything, don't say anything defensive. Affirm the way they say they're feeling.
Good, Jacob. So we're going right to the end of this presentation, and we're going to give you 10 effective communication skills for increasing intimacy. So, Jacob, you take number one.
Number one, as we mentioned, give your full attention to your partner when they are talking. Turn off your phone, shut off the television, make eye contact. So that very
Yes,
first
people,
part.
you out there. Sorry, yes, people, you out there who your spouse says, can we talk? Or can we, your spouse is communicating something and you're fidgeting with your phone constantly. And then you say, I'm hearing you. No, you're not. You're not hearing them.
Yeah. So the first part of your 3 points of active listening is actually gets to the heart of being able to increase intimacy. That where somebody feels like they have your full attention. Giving your spouse your full attention is so crucial.
Okay, two, focus on the good qualities in each other and praise each other often. That one stands on its own.
And then be assertive. And we're talking about assertive here in the sense of the knowing, walking away from a conversation, knowing that you're able to share your thoughts, feelings, and needs. Needs here, not wants. It's very hard to share your needs because it expresses your vulnerability. If you can have a conversation with your spouse and you felt like you're able to express your needs, it's a good way to be assertive without being critical. And a good way, of course, to be assertive without being critical, as we mentioned before, is to using the I pronoun rather than the you statements. Not triggering your partner to feel like they have to defend themselves. And again, remember, assertiveness is communicating politely with charity and focusing on the message. And if you don't accomplish any of those, you were not being assertive. You might have gotten something off your chest, but you were not being assertive. So don't confuse assertiveness with just simply speaking your mind, regardless of how you did it. For example, I worry when you don't let me know you'll be late, rather than you're always late. You're always late gets somebody to be defensive. But when when you're saying that you're worried that somebody's late, you're talking about how they're being late makes you feel. And they would like for you to feel better than the way you expressed that you were feeling, as opposed to them feeling like you're attacking them about always being late.
And me listening to that sentence, I'm hearing your need, and your need is to be assured that I'm okay. Your need right here comes through, even though you start by saying you're worried. From that, I can hear you want to be assured that I am safe. Okay, number four, avoid criticism. I have very simple ones, guys. Just avoid criticism. There's a lot you can say without using sarcasm. Criticism would only embitter your spouse. That's it. Or embarrass your spouse. That's it. And that shuts down communication.
So criticism is a whole big subject that we can't really get into because it sets down a cascade event that ends up with a lot of acrimony. So let's just leave it at that. Try as much as possible to not be critical. If you must criticize, Yes, if you absolutely have to, you have to balance it out with at least one positive comment. For example,
That's number 5.
yes, for example, if I appreciate how you take the trash out each week, in the future, can you remember to also wheel the trash can back from the end of the driveway? And I'm sure there are other better versions even that you can phrase that second part, which comes as positive criticism and makes the person want to do it.
Number 6, listen to understand and not to judge. This is what we're talking about in the beginning. Do not make assumption. When you're listening, don't assume you've already heard anything. Just listen and understand from the person's perspective. Don't judge them.
And to show that you're listening actively, this is number 7. Make sure you summarize your partner's comments before sharing your own reactions or feelings. Mirroring again, that word mirroring.
Yeah. I hear you say, I should summarize your comments before sharing my reaction. I hear you say.
And I will tell the list that's correct. And the list is going to get back to me with, is there more?
Yeah.
She's not going to immediately jump in and start explaining. She just wants to make sure that she has heard me out and I've said everything I had to say. Wait.
Avoid blaming each other and work together for a solution. You guys, the Bible says that you do not we wrestle not against flesh and blood. That is because that's the Bible telling you that your enemy is not your spouse. You're not fighting your spouse, you're not fighting your husband, you're not fighting your wife, right? When you read that further, you see that you're fighting spiritual powers, right? So avoid blaming each other. Avoid being in a fight where you're blaming each other rather than talk to each other, because together you guys can work for a solution if you don't blame each other. Number 9,
Use this 10-step approach. We're going to get into the 10-step approach when we talk about this 10-step of conflict resolution. For problems that come up again and again, you absolutely have to use this 10 steps of resolving couple conflicts.
and we'll be talking about next week. 10. If you've tried all what we've said and it has not worked, seek counseling. Yes, people, we are saying seek counseling. It is not weak. It is not a sign of weakness. It is not an issue. Seeking counseling just means bringing the third person. And you know what? It is in the Bible. It says, if you try to resolve a problem with your brother and the brother will not listen to you, he says you should take that brother and call a second person and sit down and talk to them, right? Seek counseling, because that second person there would provide some kind of a buffer for you guys to really talk more. And if you are not able to resolve it, seek counsel before it becomes more serious and then your marriage breaks because of that. So we have homework for you guys today. If you were listening, please take our homework and try to do it. And let us know if you did the homework when we meet on Thursday.
And our homework is basically asking you to engage in a dialogue, a daily dialogue, which will be an intentional effort to talk about your relationship rather than discussing your activities for that day. The focus of the dialogue should be on your feelings about each other and your lives together. So please, in the next few days, be intentional to set aside some time, maybe 15 minutes. It shouldn't be that much time each day to discuss these 3 questions. And you can do very simple yes or no answers, and you don't have to drag it out unless it's very crucial. Simply ask yourself the question, what did you most enjoy about your relationship that day? What was dissatisfying about your relationship today? How can you be helpful to each other? Those 3 simple questions can set off a conversation.
All right. The second one is do daily compliments. This helps us to focus on the positive things that our partners bring to our relationship, right? So every day, give your partner at least one genuine compliment. It could be something as simple as you're fun to be with, or I appreciate that you were on time today from work. Something simple. You don't have to do any earth shattering thing. So do a daily dialogue and answer those 3 questions. Jacob, what were our 3 questions?
What did you most enjoy about your relationship today? What was dissatisfying about your relationship today? How can you be helpful to each other?
Okay, there you have it, guys. And that is the end of our communication presentation. Join us next Thursday evening for our live chat on our YouTube channel. Like we said last time, we're inviting couples to join us. So if you are out there and you listen to this and you have anything you would like to share with us, some good tips you've used that has made your communication work smoothly at home, or some bad things you've tried that nobody should try it and you want to come on and share share with us, please reach out to Jacob and I. We will be more than willing to bring you on as our guest for this week. And oh, if I reach out to you, please do not shy away. Third, there's a link that has been provided to you, a Google link for you to submit questions. So if you cannot join us on Thursday for the live chat and you have a question from what you've listened to, just go ahead and click that link and submit your question, and we'll be able to answer it when we are on air live. And finally,
Please like, share, and subscribe.
thank you. Our next lesson next week would be on conflict resolution. Hope to see you on Thursday. Till then, this is Dillis.
This is Jacob again. Thanks for listening.
Let's talk about love. Like you and me all night, and let's talk about love.